Hello and welcome to another tutorial. Today will be all about animation and the animation basics in Maya. And for that, before we start, make sure that two things are active. So first of all, I'm missing my timeline. So if you are also missing your timeline, please check here in Windows UI elements that time slider and range slider is checked on. Okay, because this is our animation timeline. And the second thing you find here in where it is called 24 frames per second. This is the American or the 29.79 frames per second. This is all standards from anywhere else. We take 25 frames per second. Okay, do this before you start any animation. Then here you see every frame, and what we do, you can adjust actually the size. How many frames do you see? When you want to animate 10 seconds, of course you need 250 frames here. And also here in the range slider, you can just see, okay, how big is the slider actually set up. And if you want to see here the full 250, okay, now you see the full frames here. Okay, good. That's the first thing. Then animation is quite easy actually. For that, you just need here a channel box, and I put it here on my side again because it's easier for me. And there you have all the attributes, and you can animate every attribute you have. And for that, for example, you go here to frame 1, and what I do is I press S on the keyboard. Okay, what does this do? You see all the attributes get a red label, and you see also here a red line in the timeline. When I go, for example, here to frame 250 and I do a movement, a scaling, and some kind of rotation, you see now it's a lighter red, and I press S on the keyboard again. Now it's getting dark red, and I also get a red line here. And what does this do? It does Maya calculates all the steps in between automatically. And there you can press the play button and see what happens. Your first animation. But be careful about timing, because when you press the play button and Maya plays here, you see that this is not 10 seconds playing. So there are, of course, settings that you see it in real time, because otherwise you would be confused about the timing. And there is a setting, you will find it here with this little guy and the gear. And there the preferences are opened, and you find here a time slider. And it depends on which setting you have in here. When I say play every frame, Maya just plays as fast as he can play. This could be slower or faster, it depends on the animation. And what you should do is also switch this to 25 frames per second one time. Then this is more or less real time if Maya is possible to do it. Yeah, save. And then this animation, now when I started here from the beginning, it now really lasts 10 seconds. So this is your actual timing. You see it's very slow beginning, then it's getting a little bit faster, and then it gets a little bit slower to the end. And you can change this. And you can also change the timing. There are two editors for that. The first one, you find everything here in Windows Animation Editors, and we have two things, the graph editor and the dope sheet. Of course, there are a lot of different stuff you also need for animation, but these are the basic ones you need. The dope sheet is for the timing, and in the dope sheet you see here you can also slide with the Alt key or the Option key and the right mouse button. Then you see here the keys also very small. There's one here at 1 and somewhere here at 250. And you can take the key and actually, when you are in the move mode, okay, be careful where you are, because you can move it actually the same way as you move things in Maya. When you are in the move mode and you take the middle mouse button, then I can move, you see it, I just moved here my red line to, for example, you can also type it in here, oh, not 10, I want it to be at 100. And what does this make? Of course, my timing a little bit different, that now my real-time animation is a little bit faster. That's one thing. There you can change the timing or the key positions. Second thing is the graph editor. And what you see now may be a little bit confusing at the beginning, but what you see is the timing movements, and because of the curve, also the speed changes a little bit. So when the curve is more flat, it is slower. When it's more here downhill, then the animation goes faster, and at the end, it gets slower again. So there are different modes of tuning this. So when I select the points and say there should be linear tangents, for example, they are fully straight. And what does this do? I'm gonna play here my animation again. Maybe you noticed a little bit of difference, that now it moves the same speed all the animation long. Okay? When I want to, so let's check if this works when I auto tangents. Yeah. Of course I can, so I'm just playing around a little bit and show what's happening when I do this, for example. Weird. Okay, so be careful what you do, because it changes the position, the movement, and it could change. Now, of course, I did quite weird stuff. And what you should do is, of course, use it not so all the frames, but you can change timings. For example, when I want my rotation a little bit different, or just one animation movement, you see here that my Z rotation now actually just is at the end. See, it does nothing in the beginning and then it does all the rotation. Of course, it will be, especially in the beginning, a little bit more complex to understand what this curve does. I just want to show you that you can do a little bit of timing work with that if you need it. So, doing good animations is not learned in 5 minutes. It takes a lot of time and a lot of ambition to really do good stuff. If you're interested in this topic, then the first thing that you should do is check out the 12 principles of animation. There are a lot of videos on YouTube, and I just took here one out of it. And the first principle, I will also also show you is squash and stretch. And you see here what is the aim, that you can emphasize speed, momentum, whatever. Okay, this is actually the first animation that you should do when you start animating a bouncing ball, to understand how timing and the techniques of the principles work. Well, in our lessons we don't have the time to go in the topic that deep, so I just show you a short introduction to this topic. Okay, for that I prepared a simple scene where I show you the animation of a ball bouncing, and I will show you also rigid body dynamics. But first of all, when you have a new scene, be sure, as always, that here is 25 frames per second on, and I want the ball here to pop up from nowhere. So what I do first, also remember, maybe you freeze all of your stuff here and delete the history. I don't have much history on that, so but let's do it. Delete all by type history. Good. Then at frame 0, the scale of the ball should be 0 because I don't want to see it, and press S on the keyboard. Then I go to, for example, frame 15 and set the scales here to 1 again, and also key it. So it's popping up out of nowhere. And to give it more emphasis, and this is also one of the animation principles, that you actually exaggerate your animation. That means I want the pop-up to be bigger and then bounce back to the original size. That means, for example, when I have here the original size of 1, I go here some frames earlier to 10 or 11. Yeah, let's take 11. And at this time, it should be a little bit bigger. I take here 0.2, press S, and it looks much more appealing when it just pops up a little bit bigger and then going back to its original size. Of course, you can do this even further, or bouncing between bigger and smaller 2 or 3 times if you want to, but it's just for the starting point here. And our animation curves, which are set automatically, they are doing quite well. Then I want to stay the ball here some frames in the air, and then I want to fall it down. So what I do is I go to here frame 30 and push it down to the floor, more or less. I will change this anyway later, so press S again. So now it's falling on the floor. And what we should do is, at a certain time, for example here, I want my scaling to be, here's the scaling to 1. Now maybe we could do it, yeah, we will just do it in between. No, we do it here before it hits the floor. Go to frame 28. And when you are in the scale tool here, have a quick check in the tool settings that the orientation axis is object. And then you scale up your ball a little bit. You see it here? For example, 1.5 or something. And also we have to scale it down in, you see here I take the square in between, so because the ball should keep the actual mass, so we have to scale it down a little bit. just for, yeah, take it to 0.6 or something. And then I take just the scaling values and right-click, key selected. So what does this do? You see, now it stretches up, and you see, right, it cuts the floor a little bit, but that's not so. It looks much more appealing. Of course, it's a little bit too much, but it looks cool. Then in the next 2 frames further, I squash it down. What means, for example, like this, and I have to scale these values a little bit up. Okay, and because now it's not on the floor again, I just have to move it down a little bit. And then I just press S again, so it's keying all of the values I just changed. Well, now it's stretching, hitting the floor, squashing down, and maybe in the next even go some steps 2 or 3 frames further. It will pop up in the air again, and I just scale it here back to 1 again. Press S. Let's see what's happening. Yep. Now it's just up to bounce a little bit higher. Maybe I could stop here the animation. Maybe do it a little bit higher. Press S. Whoop. And then even 3 or 4 frames further. Now I don't do this squashing and stretching again. Of course, you could do it several times and squash and stretch it not too much again. So maybe the timing, if the timing isn't perfect, you see it seems a little bit, just so to my range scaling. See, whoop. Looks a little bit weird here from the timing, and also because the squashing and stretching is missing a little bit on the second run. So go here to graph editor. You see here, no, not the graph editor, sorry. Of course, here can you change the timing. Where's the dope sheet? So here I select here, then press F on the keyboard, so it's a little bit better. And there you can experiment when you want, for example, here to be this a little bit later or earlier in animation. And of course, it takes a lot of experience how the timing should look like, and there are a lot of examples that will help you. Good. The next thing is some rigid body dynamics, because sometimes falling lets things fall is a little bit easier with doing the simulation. And for that, I prepared here a gear and some kind of domino stones. And what I do with that is I select all of this stuff, and you have to change here from modeling to effects, because here we have some gravity in it, in fields and solvers, and that means, okay, on these objects there should the gravity effect. Okay, so you see now the things are falling, but they don't collide with the floor. So I select the floor, say go to create passive rigid body. A passive rigid body is just a colliding object, but it's not affected here by the gravity. Create passive rigid body, and now see what's happening. Yeah, cool. I have to do here my animation a little bit longer, that we see what's happening right away. So, your perfect easy animation. You can adjust here a lot of stuff. Sorry. When you select the object, there is a rigid body solve on it. That means that you can change here some stuff to that your animation appeals real. And for example, you can change here the mass, the bouncing. For example, when I just decrease the bouncing a little bit, then you will see that it's not bouncing that high, and there it has a completely different animation. The damping is some kind of slowing down your reaction. When I do it to 0.5, you see it slows down the reaction actually. The friction, die Reibung, could also, for example, when you change that, be aware that don't change them too high. You see that just the reaction is a little bit different. So you can play around a little bit with that. Just have a little bit of fun, because it's fun. Yeah, that was a short introduction. Intro, letting a ball fall and doing some quick rigid body animations. And I hope it helps a little bit for setting up your first animations.